Imagine holding a component about the size of a grain of rice.
Right. Barely visible.
Exactly, barely visible. But knowing that if it fails, or even if it runs just like a few degrees too hot.
Oh, the whole system crashes.
Right. The biggest, most advanced AI data centers on Earth would essentially just go dark.
It's terrifying, honestly.
It is. So welcome to the deep dive. I want to speak directly to you, our listener, today, because this whole exploration is based entirely on a source that you sent us.
And what a source it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's dense. It's totally loaded with acronyms. It reads like this secretive, highly enthusiastic dispatch from the absolute bleeding edge of the tech and finance world.
Which is exactly where the most interesting stuff happens, you know?
Exactly. So our mission today is to decode exactly why this brief little snippet of text is causing such massive shockwaves for the insiders who actually know how to read it.
Yeah, it really is like a masterclass in reading between the lines because, I mean, on the surface, this text just looks like a dry, standard issue corporate update.
Just normal PR noise.
Right, PR noise. But if you actually understand the underlying engineering and the very real physical bottlenecks that are threatening global computing right now,
Which we're going to get into.
yeah, you realize this document is mapping out a fundamental shift in like a multi-billion-dollar supply chain.
Okay, let's unpack this. So the core text we're analyzing is this triumphant, practically all caps announcement regarding two specific companies.
Jabil and Civers.
Right. Jabil, which is referenced by its stock ticker, JBL, and Sivers, referenced as SIC. The text literally kicks off by proclaiming in all caps, it's official, regarding their new partnership on optical transceivers.
Which sounds so mundane to most people.
Right. To a casual observer browsing, like a stock forum, this just looks like everyday corporate chatter.
Correct.
But buried inside the very next few sentences are these massive implications.
Yeah, it perfectly captures that intersection where hardcore hardware specs just collide head-on with high-stakes institutional finance.
It's rare.
It's very rare. We don't often see a single document encapsulate both, a major engineering breakthrough and the raw psychology of the stock market so clearly.
So to understand why the market actually cares about this specific announcement, we kind of have to translate the highly specific hardware that gets mentioned right in the very first line.
The jargon.
Yeah, the jargon.
Yeah.
The source states that Jabil is developing a 1.6T linear receive optical, or LRO, transceiver module.
A mouthful.
Definitely. And to achieve this, it says they're utilizing Sivers high-performance distributed feedback, or DFB, lasers.
And those acronyms right there, the LRO and the DFB, that's the entire key to this puzzle.
Okay, so I want to push back a bit on the first number we see, the 1.6T.
Sure.
We're talking about 1.6 terabits per second.
Yep.
In the networking world, we're constantly hearing about speed upgrades, right? Like going from 400G to 800G, and now we're at 1.6T.
It's always faster.
Exactly. It's easy to look at that and just think, okay, well, the tech got faster. That's just what tech does.
Just another Tuesday.
Right. So why is jumping to 1.6T such a massive hurdle? Like, why does it require this specific, highly touted partnership to even work?
But what's fascinating here is that pushing 1.6 terabits of data through a single connection every single second, it actually fundamentally changes the physics of the environment.
How so?
You're moving a volume of data that is, frankly, almost incomprehensible. And at that ridiculous speed, signal degradation becomes your absolute biggest enemy.
Meaning the data basically gets scrambled.
Exactly. Any slight imperfection, like literally any microscopic jitter in the light pulse that's carrying that data over the fiber optic cable.
Just a tiny wobble.
Yeah, a tiny wobble means the data arrives corrupted, you drop packets, and the entire system fails.
Oh, wow.
That is exactly why Jabil can't just use, any off-the-shelf light source for a 1.6T module. They explicitly need those Sivers distributed feedback, or DFB lasers.
Okay, let me see if I can visualize the difference here for a second. Think of ordinary lasers, like a massive crowd of people, right? And they're all shouting a message across a giant canyon.
Okay, I like this.
So it's incredibly loud, and the sound technically reaches the other side, but all those overlapping voices just create distortion.
Right. It's just noise.
The message gets completely garbled by its own volume, but a DFB laser, on the other hand, would be like a perfectly synchronized choir, just simming one pure, piercing note.
Spot on.
And because that signal is absolutely pure, the message arrives on the other side of the canyon with basically zero distortion.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the actual mechanism at play here, because a DFB laser isn't just generating light like a normal bulb.
What's it doing differently?
It uses this microscopic structure, it's called a Bragg grating, and it's built directly into the semiconductor itself.
A Bragg grating.
Yeah, and this grating physically filters out all the other wavelengths. It literally forces the laser to emit just a single, ultra-stable, highly pure beam of light.
Like the single note from the choir.
Exactly. When you are pushing 1.6 terabits of data, you absolutely cannot afford the shouting crowd of a standard laser. The signal has to be flawless from the exact millisecond it gets generated.
Gotcha. So the text highlights this specific component because Sivers DFB lasers provide that unyielding precision.
They do. And Jabil relies entirely on this very specific light source to make their 1.6T module function at all.
Which means Jabil is essentially building like a next-generation sports car, and they've just officially announced that Sivers is the only company manufacturing the specific engine capable of actually pushing it to that top speed.
That's exactly what this announcement is signaling, yeah.
But building the fastest hardware is really only half the battle, right?
Yeah.
Because the source material you send us explicitly reveals the real-world hurdle this technology has to overcome.
Yes, the physical limitations.
Right, and that brings us to a really crucial quote from Jabil Photonics in the text.
The statement where they detail what this integration actually achieves out in the field.
Let me just read it exactly as it appears in the source here. Quote, "Working with Sivers will allow us to deliver a 1.6T LRO solution that meets both data center performance and power targets at scale."
There it is.
Now, I want to zero in on that phrase, performance and power targets. I have to admit, I'm a little confused here.
Why is that?
Well, usually in computing, if you dramatically increase performance, like if you double the speed to 1.6 terabits, you automatically drain significantly more power.
Oh, absolutely.
And you generate massive amounts of heat. So is this quote secretly telling us that the real breakthrough here isn't just the raw speed, but the energy efficiency?
You nailed it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that contradiction, getting more speed without using way more power, that is the holy grail of current data center architecture.
How are they hitting these speeds without just melting the server racks down to slag?
The answer lies in the other acronym we kind of skipped over earlier, LRO, or linear receive optics.
Okay, LRO. Let's break that down.
So, to understand why LRO is such a massive breakthrough for saving power, we first have to look at how a traditional optical transceiver works.
Okay.
Historically, when that light signal arrives from across the fiber optic cable, it's always slightly messy.
From the shouting crowd.
Right. So the transceiver uses a component called a digital signal processor, or a DSP chip, to computationally clean up the signal before it passes it into the actual network switch.
Okay, so the DSP is essentially acting like this heavy, super power-hungry spell checker, just running 24/7 to fix all the garbled messages.
It's a spell checker. And those DSP chips, they require a massive amount of electricity.
I can imagine.
In high-speed modules, the DSP alone can consume like 10 to 15 watts of power per unit.
Just for one.
Just for one. Now, multiply that 15 watts by hundreds of thousands of transceivers sitting inside a single hyperscale data center.
Oh my God, you're suddenly burning literally megawatts of power just to spell check your own data.
Exactly. And burning that power generates an immense amount of heat, which then requires even more power just to run the cooling systems.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. Hyperscalers, the massive global data centers run by the big tech giants, they have hit a hard physical limit.
They just can't draw any more power from the grid.
They literally can't. Their power grids and cooling systems cannot handle the energy demands of traditional DSP-based transceivers running at 1.6T speeds. They are completely terrified of the thermal load.
Wow. Which brings us back to linear receive optics. The text mentions a 1.6T LRO solution.
Right.
Does LRO somehow bypass that heavy spell checker?
It doesn't just bypass it, it strips it out entirely on the receive side.
Wait, really? Just gone?
Yeah, completely gone. Linear receive optics takes the incoming analog light signal and passes it directly to the switch without ever using a DSP chip to clean it up first.
That's wild.
It is. You remove the processor and you instantly eliminate this massive chunk of the power consumption and the heat generation. You dramatically lower the thermal footprint of the entire server rack.
Wait, but if you remove the spell checker, how does the data not just become a completely garbled mess?
Well, think about it. You can only safely remove the spell checker if the original writer has absolutely flawless grammar.
Oh, I see. the pure single note from the choir.
Exactly, the DFB laser.
We come full circle.
We do. The only way linear receive optics actually works is if the initial light source generating the signal is so incredibly pure and so stable that the signal doesn't even need to be computationally cleaned up when it arrives.
That makes total sense. So that is why Jabil and Civers are so deeply intertwined here.
Exactly. Jabil solves the hyperscaler power crisis by using LRO, but they can only physically use LRO if they integrate Sivers ultra-pure DFB lasers.
That is a staggering chain of logic when you really map it out.
It's incredible engineering.
We're talking about stripping out the heaviest, most power-hungry processing chips in a massive global data center, all simply because a microscopic component the size of a grain of rice can fire a perfectly pure beam of light.
It really is beautiful.
It totally solves the entire power versus performance bottleneck.
Which is exactly why the quote from Jabil ends with the words "at scale."
Ah, right, at scale.
Because anyone can build one fast, efficient transceiver in a fancy laboratory.
Sure.
But hyperscalers need millions of them. They need a solution that works at scale to keep their entire global networks from just breaching their thermal budgets and shutting down.
So this partnership is basically signaling to the entire industry that the exact technological cocktail required to keep these AI data centers running fast and cool is finally ready for mass deployment.
That is exactly the signal.
Well, knowing the physical engineering behind this and like why this specific technological handshake is so vital to data centers, it totally recontextualizes the final and honestly the most dramatic part of the source text you sent us.
The institutional reaction, yeah.
Right. It explains the timeline of how this information actually reached the financial markets and why it was treated with such intense scrutiny by insiders.
It really exposes the mechanics of how the market digests, verifies, and ultimately prices in this kind of deep tech disruption.
So the text points out something fascinating here. It mentions that there were heavy hints about this exact technology from, quote, physical sources at OFC.
Right, OFC.
Now, just for context, OFC is the massive optical fiber communication conference, right?
Yeah, it is the premier gathering for the entire industry. Everyone is there.
Okay, so the author of this post notes that despite these physical hints at the biggest conference of the year, quote, many institutions needed actual confirmation like this.
They wouldn't move without it.
The text also openly marvels at the fact that the crucial light source, in all caps,
right,
for these massive trillion-dollar hyperscaler supply chains is coming from a company, Sivers, sitting at a mere $500 MC or market cap.
The juxtaposition there is striking, isn't it?
It really is.
You have the massive scale of the hyperscaler infrastructure on one side versus the relatively microscopic size of the company providing the actual foundational component on the other.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting to me. At an event like OFC, you have like the smartest engineers in the world gathered in one place.
Absolutely.
They're looking at prototypes. They're seeing the tech function with their own eyes. The rumor mill must be churning like crazy.
It's nonstop gossip.
So why would massive financial institutions ignore physical proof at an industry event, sit on their hands, and just wait for a piece of paper that screams, it's official, before they actually make a move?
It all comes down to institutional risk management.
Risk management.
Yeah, a fund manager overseeing, say, $10 billion. They cannot allocate massive capital based on a trade show floor demonstration.
Even if the tech is amazing.
Regardless of how brilliant the underlying physics might be. Because in the hardware world, there is a massive, massive gulf between having a working prototype and actually achieving high-yield, high-volume manufacturing.
Ah.
Industry veterans actually have a name for it. They call it the Valley of Death for hardware startups.
The Valley of Death. Because it's one thing to, hand build a perfect DFB laser for a shiny convention booth.
With your best engineers watching it like a hawk, yeah.
Right, and an entirely different challenge to manufacture 2 million of them.
Yeah.
Without the defect rate just completely bankrupting your company.
Exactly that. And this brings us directly to the significance of that $500 million market cap the author was obsessing over.
Right. Why does the size of the company matter so much to the banks?
Well, in the realm of hyperscaler supply chains, the companies providing the core infrastructure are usually valued in the tens, if not hundreds, of billions of dollars.
Like NVIDIA or Broadcom.
Exactly. They are established titans with sprawling, globally redundant foundries. So a company with a $500 million market cap, that is considered a microcap in this arena.
Practically startup.
To a hyperscaler, it represents a massive supply chain risk.
So if you're, say, Microsoft or Google building a billion-dollar AI data center, you are absolutely terrified of relying on a microcap company for your most critical component.
Terrified, because if they stumble in manufacturing, if they hit a snag in the valley of death, your entire multi-billion-dollar build-out just completely stalls.
You're waiting on a grain of rice to finish your data center.
Right. So institutional investors, they know this dynamic perfectly.
Right.
They saw the tech at OFC. They knew the Sivers DFB laser solved the power dilemma we talked about.
But they held back.
They held back because they also knew that a hyperscaler would basically never buy directly from a $500 million company due to that execution risk.
Makes sense.
So the institutions were waiting for validation. They needed a Tier 1, globally recognized manufacturer, someone with massive scale and a flawless reputation, to basically step up and say, we have audited their technology, we have vetted their manufacturing lines, and we are officially integrating their component into our flagship product.
Enter Jabil.
Exactly. Jabil is that Tier 1 giant.
Wow.
When Jabil issues an official announcement stating they're using Sivers lasers for their 1.6T LRO modules, they aren't just buying parts, they are acting as the ultimate validator.
They're co-signing the loan, basically.
Yes. Jabil is absorbing the supply chain risk on behalf of the hyperscalers. They're telling the market that Sivers isn't just a trade show prototype anymore. They are a volume-ready, battle-tested supplier.
So that all caps, its official line at the start of the memo. It isn't just excitement about a cool product launch.
No, not at all.
It's the exact moment the risk gets wiped off the table for the big money.
Precisely. It's the moment the institutions realize that this tiny $500 million company isn't going to be crushed in the valley of death.
They're actually about to be pulled right into the slipstream of a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure rollout.
The capital is unlocked because the structural dependency is finally, legally, and publicly confirmed by a giant.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring this home for you, the listener, who actually brought this to us.
It's quite a journey.
It really is. I mean, we started with what looked like just a brief, almost frantic forum post loaded with ticker symbols and tech jargon.
But we unpacked the deep engineering beneath it.
We really did. We've seen how the pure, undistorted signal of a distributed feedback laser, or choir singing one note, allows data centers to entirely remove those power-hungry DSP chips, utilizing linear receive optics instead.
Which is brilliant.
And we've seen how that specific architectural shift solves the ultimate power versus performance thermal dilemma, the exact bottleneck that is threatening to stall global AI rollouts at 1.6 terabit speeds.
The hyperscaler's biggest headache, gone.
Exactly. And finally, we explored the psychology of institutional capital, right? Understanding exactly why massive funds required a Tier 1 giant like Jabil to publicly validate a microcap supplier before they believed this structural shift was actually happening at scale.
It's all connected. And for you listening to this deep dive today, the true takeaway here is redefining what it actually means to be well-informed in the modern market.
It's not just reading the news.
No, true insight doesn't come from reading the same headline that everyone else is reading. It comes from understanding the physics of the bottleneck and knowing how to read between the lines of dense technical confirmation statements to spot exactly when that bottleneck has been cleared.
It's about finding those foundational supply chain realignments long before they're just, neatly summarized on the evening news.
Exactly. Because if massive institutions require this level of explicit official validation, even when physical prototypes are openly demonstrating the solution right there on trade show floors.
It really makes you wonder, right?
It does. What other massive foundational technological shifts are currently hiding right in plain sight, just waiting for the words, "it's official," to permanently alter the market?
Such a fascinating question to leave off on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.